Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host. Glad you could join me. Happy New Year. Yeah, the glow is fading slowly, but hope you celebrated in whatever way you deem to celebrate. We'll celebrate all things shooting this week on the podcast. Don Currie, the chief instructor at the National Sporting Clays Association, will be on the line with me in just a moment. Whether you're a wing shooter, a target shooter, or all of the above, so is Don. He's going to offer some advice on everything from gun fit to approaching a pointing dog to what you do when you're unboxing that Christmas present you got. It's all coming up on the Upland Nation podcast. We'll also be asking your dog for his or her New Year's resolutions. I'll be asking you a question in the Upland Nation Puzzler quiz, and I'll be offering up a prize, and it's all made possible by RuffLand Performance Kennels, Happy Jack Dog Care Products, Sage and Breaker Gun Pick Care Products, Pointer Shotguns, Dr. Tim's Natural Performance Dog Food, and MidValleyClays.com. Shop there for your next shotgun. What are you getting out? It's the waning days of the season for most of us. With luck, I'll be out in a couple other places real soon, getting out of the snow, stopping in Nevada on the way back from a trip to Southern California and Arizona, where I hope to start chasing some of those birds for a change. Some will be familiar, but in unfamiliar places, and some will be brand new to me. Haven't shot many Gambel's quails, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to getting together with a couple friends that I started friendships with online. So, it does pay off once in a while, as you know, and hope you're doing the same. Getting out, being safe, enjoying the heck out of the last few days of this season. The Upland Nation podcast is brought to you in part by Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, crafted at the highest caliber. Go on over to sageandbreaker.com. Sign up for the mailing list. You'll get the first notice of any sales and any new products coming down the line. One of my favorites is one you're going to use up. That doesn't happen very much with Sage and Breaker. Fred Bohm calls it CLP. It is a spray-on, non-toxic way to take care of your gun metal. Clean, lube, protect. Learn more about CLP and all the heirloom quality cases and care products at sageandbreaker.com. And if you're looking for a starter shotgun for your kids, or if you're looking to upgrade your own shotgun, go to legacysports.com and then click on the pointer tab. Learn all about their variety of styles and grades of guns, from their Field Tech semi-automatics to their Sport Tech target guns, Lux over and unders, their Acreus over and unders, which I use all the time now. Love their fit and finish as well as their value. Learn more about them at legacysports.com. Then go up to the brands tab and click on Pointer Shotguns. Well, I got to admit, I'm being a little selfish here, but that's the whole idea, isn't it, on a podcast, is my podcast, but I'm bringing on somebody who might be able to help you and me both. Don Currie is the chief instructor of the National Sporting Clays Association, also a very sought-after shooting coach. We've enjoyed his advice and knowledge in the past. Don also runs the Academy of Wing and Clay Shooting. He's in a warm place. That's the main reason I called. Don, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be back again.
Okay, so put me in your place because I could use a little bit of nice weather.
Well, I have to say that this is an unusually ugly day in Florida. It's a little bit muggy, and it's overcast. But we've been having pretty nice weather here in Florida. No snow. We haven't seen any of the white stuff. We were really hoping for some lower temperatures over Christmas. We don't get, even though we don't get a white Christmas, we look for a cooler Christmas, but we didn't get that either. So anyway, we judge how well the winter is going by how many times we're able to light the fire pit.
Oh, that's, I wish I could say that. And if you're ever desperate, feel free to bring your snow shovel and come on up here and help out a little bit. In the meanwhile,
Sounds good.
In the meanwhile, what are you doing down there? Are you teaching? Tell me what's new in your life.
Yeah, so, well, in general, I spend about 130 some odd days a year on the road teaching. And when I say on the road, some of that's in Florida and some of it's elsewhere in the Southeast, as well as Chicago and Minnesota, and as well as the other locations that I go where I teach instructor courses. So I stay pretty active. But recently, in the last couple of weeks, I've been teaching here in Florida in the last week at South Florida Shooting Club, which is really a fantastic club, I think one of the premier clubs in the country. And then just about a week prior to that, I got back off a 2-week loop that I do 3 times a year to North Carolina and Georgia,
Nice.
teaching and doing gun fittings and whatnot.
Well, we're going to talk about gun fitting in particular in a moment or two, but here's one thing we've never really talked about. And I'm a big believer, and for a few years I actually made a TV series for the Sporting Clays Association. But there are a lot of people who have never set foot on a sporting clays course for any number of reasons, and I understand them all because I was there once too, or even at a trap club or a skeet range or something like that. What would you tell people who they want to be better shooters, but they're kind of intimidated by that kind of the quote club unquote atmosphere?
Yeah, well, every club has its own personality, I would say, and there's a club personality for everyone, but I would say that, and this is somewhat self-interested, right? But almost all clubs have either a resident instructor or an instructor that is there periodically. Mm-hmm. And if someone's intimidated about trying sporting clays, one of the best ways one can sort of get acclimated is just to take an hour lesson with a local instructor, because I think that sort of takes away some of the intimidation factor, not only for the sport itself, but also some of the local customs, regulations, etiquette, and whatnot. But I guess I would say jump in.
Yeah.
just jump in, because it's a lot of fun. It's one of the few places and few activities where you can blow up things with a shotgun legally, and it's very gratifying for us Americans who tend to be instant gratification oriented.
That's absolutely true. As I used to say, let's go make noise and break things.
That's right.
And just for everybody out there who's agonizing over this, make it a New Year's resolution to go out and try some of this. And most of the clubs these days will actually have a real kind of almost entry level process, if you will. Somebody will show you how to work the machines if you need to. They'll show you where a practice machine is. You could shoot on your own. All of those things will definitely help your. Hey, Tiger Woods, even in the shape he's in now, he doesn't set foot on the golf course until he's whacked a couple hundred balls at the range first.
That's right.
Shouldn't we as well? But you also get to hunt a little bit when you're out in those places. And I know when we talked last, you were talking about somebody, a dog trainer / plantation outfitter, if you will. Have you been hunting at all lately?
I did. I just returned from a quail hunt. I would say it was about 5 weeks ago or so in northern Georgia. It was a private club. One of my longtime clients and students invited myself and another instructor to go hunting with them. It was just a great experience. They do early release, so they are pen-raised birds, but they do early release, so they really do behave very much like wild birds. And as is the custom at this club, you don't typically hunt down singles. So you flush a covey, and the coveys were really nice. I mean, I don't think any covey was under 12, let's say. and we just had a great experience. The weather was a little brisk because it was in northern Georgia. One for a Florida boy, one could even say it was cold, but that wouldn't compare to other regions of the country.
I was hunting in Nevada a week ago, and the high was 22.
Ouch.
Yeah. Poor dogs. But tell me about the dog work at this place. How do they run it? And are you hunting a foot, a horseback, or in one of those cool wagons?
No, in this particular club, we hunted over dogs, and the dogs belong to my friend and client that invited us. And the dog work was terrific. We didn't hunt over pointers and flushers. We just had a pointer. Mm-hmm. So although the birds were again behaving somewhat wild, so we did have a little bit of kicking up that we had to do, but which I frankly don't like to do a whole lot of. The ideal for me, the ideal hunt is one where you're using both, 2 pointers at a time and a flusher. And to me, that's, as I think I mentioned in the last podcast, that's like watching an orchestra, and I don't really like the kicking up of birds and having to coax the birds out of the grass. But other than that, the birds flew very well. And the weather was brisk, so it felt like a quail hunting morning.
I can't leave it at that. I have to ask you how you shot.
Oh, I can't say I never missed any. Okay, yeah. I can't say I never missed any, but I shot okay. I shot respectably. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So just for the record, even the chief instructor of the NSCA misses a bird once in a while.
I'd have to call myself a liar if I told you otherwise.
They wouldn't call it hunting; they'd call it shopping.
That's right.
Well, when you go, and I'm lucky enough to be able to go to places like that more often than most people do. In fact, I was looking at the map last night. I've hunted in 28 states.
Wow.
And for everything, from sleeping in the back of my pickup to one of those kind of plantations. But they all have something going for them. But what about that plantation vibe? What is the thing you take away from that and tell everybody about next week after you've gone there?
Well, I think that it's a combination. I mean, the ideal quail hunting experience for me is you come in the morning, you have a hunt in the afternoon, you have lunch maybe, have a hunt in the afternoon, have a nice dinner out by the fire pit, maybe some brown water after dinner, and then get up early the next morning and do it again, have a great lunch, and leave then. But, I would say that the experience of quail hunting is, yes, of course, you have the dog, certainly have the quail in the field, right? That's a requisite. But to me, the things that really make quail hunting experience what it is number one, the dog work, number two, the camaraderie that happens both on the quail fields, but also during the times when you're not hunting in the evenings. And it's just a great time for getting together with like-minded sportsmen, and you really feel like you've sort of taken a full breath of the sportsman's lifestyle when you drive away from a plantation after a 2-day hunt.
You're absolutely right, and you got them in the right order. So yes, we will continue this podcast interview. You've passed the test, but there is something to be had at all of those. And I used to joke about it when I was doing more and more seminars than I'm doing now. But if somebody goes to a seminar, or they're wondering if they should go to a seminar, or they go to a lodge, or whatever it is, if you can come back, if you can take away one thing from that experience, you're probably ahead of the crowd on that stuff. And it could be something you learned while you were having a drink, or it could be something a dog taught you, or anything in between. So let's jump in on this. Christmas has passed. Most of the folks who got a new shotgun under the tree have opened it up and hopefully put it together and probably run a few rounds through it. But if somebody is contemplating, well, let's just say somebody has got a new gun and it's in the box, they're opening the box. What are the things that they need to do before they actually go out and shoot it? And I don't mean assemble the thing, but is there anything we need to do when this thing shows up from the factory that we may not think about? In the old days, for example, they came with that grease all over them.
Right.
Do we need to, is there a need to do anything like that before we put the gun together?
Well, let me come back to the grease part. But I think if we're talking specifically about shotguns and you've just opened up a brand new shotgun and you're wondering what to do with it, first, second, and third, to me, and I learned this the hard way, and we can go into that embarrassing story if you like. But the first thing you want to do is make sure that your barrels are properly regulated in an over and under shotgun, and I'm talking specifically for an over and under shotgun.
Yeah.
So what does barrel regulation mean? It basically means that both barrels are shooting at the same place at a certain distance. Okay. So and that may seem sort of a blinding flash of the obvious, right? Like, well, why would I need to check that, right? So don't they check that at the factory? Well, yes, but there's a small percentage, and I learned this the hard way, there's a small percentage of over and under shotguns that make their way out of a factory that the barrels are not properly regulated. So in most cases, and someone could challenge the statement I'm getting ready to make, but in most cases in a factory, they're test firing a gun at a range of somewhere between 16 and 25 yards, somewhere in there, okay? And to make sure that the barrels are sound and they're shooting at the same place at a certain distance. So I think most shotguns, if you bench them, and by bench them, I mean, you're shooting them like a rifle, resting on sandbags. And that's, again, the first thing I think you should do with a shotgun when you pull it out of the box is make sure the barrels are regulated. And the way we do that is something we never, ever do after this with a shotgun, and that is aim it just like a rifle. Because some shotguns don't have sights, or they may have one bead, not two. One of the little tricks there is to just mount a straw with Scotch tape on top of the rib, and actually aim it at a stationary target that's somewhere, in the neighborhood of 16 to 20 yards, let's say, and make sure that both barrels are shooting in the same spot. If both barrels are shooting in the same spot, then that would be the last time you ever want to aim that shotgun. And but that is a necessary step, because again, there's a very, very small percentage of shotguns that will make it out of a factory that are not properly regulated. So that's important. And if you don't figure that out right out of the gate, you'll struggle with it for a year or two or more.
Yeah, and that's when I come in. That's what once every few months, someone will say, "Oh, I finally sighted it in," or did whatever they did, and realized my barrels were not regulated. Somebody showed me how to do that, and no wonder I'm missing on the second shot or whatever. But just explain to me, if I understand correctly, regulated. We got two pipes. They're theoretically they're equally they're pointing at the same position all the time, but the pipes sometimes are welded a little bit cockeyed. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's about right. That's a good way to describe it. So when you say you have two pipes, let's say it's an over and under, those barrels go out. They're just shy of parallel, so they're just a little. The trajectory of both those barrels is just a little closer together than parallel, and they actually intersect at a certain distance. And again, normally that's between 16 and 25 yards, let's say. And that's what you're looking for, is that where both, and that results in when you bench a shotgun like that and fire it like a rifle, aim it at a stationary spot, That's what you're looking for, is that both barrels fire in the same spot. And when you do that, you want to use the tightest choke you've got.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
the shot, the cartridge really doesn't matter too much. Obviously, bird shot or something that you'd use in sporting clays, like something between a 7.5 and a 9.
Mm-hmm.
And to make sure for the first time out of the box that you have a proper a shotgun, a 2-barrel shotgun with properly regulated barrels.
Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about chokes and shot sizes, because I get that question a lot as well, and I'm pretty lazy about that sort of thing. I shoot whether it's a side by side or an over and under. I'm almost always shooting improved and modified. Improved obviously on the first barrel and modified on the second barrel. But in general, do you swap them out when you're hunting much, or do you keep the same ones in all season? How does that work for a guy who really knows what they're doing?
So I'll answer the question, but I have to say you've picked the absolute worst person to ask that question of, because I shoot fixed barrels because fixed choke, because I've learned over time that looking at the bird is so much more important than fiddling around with your chokes. But let me back up a second. So one of the things, a term that people use a lot is improved, and there are actually 2 chokes that start with the word improved. It's improved cylinder and improved modified, and you can actually have improved full, I guess. Rarely you'll see that, but so it's important to use that second word. So improved cylinder, and for example, your typical quail hunter, right? What you see most often is an improved cylinder in the bottom barrel,
right,
and a modified in the top barrel. Particularly in the 28, 20 gauge, sub gauges that you use on the quail field. So, and so if I'm hunting quail and I have a shotgun that's improved cylinder on the bottom and modified on the top, I will almost never change my barrel selector in a hunt. Mm-hmm. Your expectation is, if you're hunting over dogs, that when the bird's flush, your first shot is going to be at a shorter distance than your second shot. So you just leave it there. Sure. Improved cylinder and modified with your second shot. That allows you, if you so dare, to attempt that 40-yard shot with the second barrel.
Yeah, I've heard people who've done that, but I'm not among them. But you bring up a good point, and the word improved, I use it habitually, but how do you improve cylinder?
So, yeah, okay. Well, so if you want to get technical about it, so we have sort of the order of chokes goes cylinder, skeet, improved cylinder, light modified, improved modified, and then you have varying degrees of full. You might have light full, extra full. And just from I guess to simplify the choke conundrum, right, is just that it starts at cylinder, and the reason it's called cylinder is that there is no constriction. Right. So a choke basically constricts the shot and wad as it emerges from the muzzle. That's basically, and the advantage of constricting the wad and shot as it exits the barrel is that the shot pattern, okay, the collection of shot will stay together longer at greater distances. So a cylinder, for example, choke, to say cylinder and choke is almost an oxymoron, right? Because a cylinder choke doesn't actually choke the shot and wad at all. It's the same nominal bore width as the barrel is, from the forward of the forcing cones all the way out to the muzzle. It's just the same diameter all the way out. And when we use a cylinder choke, we're really looking for no constriction at all. So our expectation is that shot will disperse fairly quickly as it emerges from the barrel or the muzzle. And as we move up in that scale that I just articulated into skeet, IC, light mod, mod. We're further constricting and tightening that the diameter at the end of the muzzle. So again, not to baffle people with numbers, but let's just say your average 12 gauge shotgun is 732 thousandths of an inch at the muzzle, and obviously the Europeans measure it in millimeters. But let's just say it's 732 one-thousandths of an inch, otherwise expressed as 0.7, or did I say 0.32? 732, so 0.732. So your cylinder, if you went in with a bore micrometer and measured your cylinder choke, it would also measure 732 one-thousandths. If you measured your skeet choke, on average, it would be 5 one-thousandths constriction smaller. So you'd be at 727 thousandths of an inch. And in general, and just make a very broad, oversimplified statement, as you go up as you tighten up in choke, as you go to skeet and IC, light mod, modify, each step you take constricts about 5 one-thousandths more.
Okay.
So you end up
right.
with a skeet choke that constricts by 5 one-thousandths. Whatever the bore width of the barrel is, you're going to be 5 one-thousandths tighter. And as you go all the way up to modified, you've got about 20 one-thousandths constriction, and then full, which is about 30 one-thousandths constriction, and everything in between.
So most of our guns will come with 3 or 4 or 5 choke tubes from the factory, but there are a whole bunch of choke manufacturers out there who do nothing but chokes. Is there an advantage to buying new choke tubes from a company that makes just choke tubes?
Well, what I would say is that it's the same thing with barrel regulation. I would trust but verify.
Yeah.
So I think Ronald Reagan coined that phrase. So trust but verify. So whenever you get, just as you want to check the barrel regulation of a shotgun when you first get it, no matter how reputable the choke company happens to be, or the company that you bought the shotgun from that supplied you with those chokes, it's a good idea to go ahead and get someone, if you don't happen to have a bore micrometer at your house, get someone to measure your chokes for you, just to make sure that what's on the label on the chokes matches the proper constriction that they should be.
All right. Well, good to know. And lots more to come on the Upland Nation podcast. That is Don Currie, the chief instructor for the National Sporting Clays Association, and one of us, a hunter as well. And I'm Scott Linden, and I'm going to stick around. I'm going to give Don a little break here while I cover a little bit of business, and then we'll be back to talk about gun fit a little bit, and maybe some tips on approaching dogs, and a little bit of everything else in the shooting area, as well as the Upland Nation quiz, puzzler and a prize, and your dog's New Year's resolution. So stick around, Don. I'll be right back to you. In the meanwhile, everybody else, pay attention. We're brought to you in part by Happy Jack Incorporated. That's happyjackinc.com. Yeah, save yourself a trip to the vet once in a while. If your dog is slowing down, it's not just because he's been worn out by all the hunting. It might be arthritis. If it is, well, then we've got a solution at happyjackinc.com. It's called Flex Enhance Plus. I've been using it on all my dogs. They get to a certain age, they start to slow down a little bit. Flex Enhance Plus is just a little chewable tab. It has glucosamine and creatine in it, and these are the things that will build back, reverse some of the damage caused over time to joints, bones, and cartilage. Learn more about all the stuff they have to offer at happyjackinc.com. And I was bragging on my new RuffLand kennel last podcast, and I just want to explain a little bit more because I don't think I was not a very good explainer on this one. At RuffLand Kennels, you can spec out what you want in your dog crate. Everything from the color, they have a wide variety of those, to where you put doors. You want a door on each end? You want a door on the front and the side? That's what I got for Flick, and it works perfectly the way my pickup truck bed is configured. All those things are available to you. Flexibility from the folks who pioneered roto-molded performance dog kennels. That's RuffLandKennels.com. And you spell rough just like Flick would. Ruff. R-U-F-F, RuffLandKennels.com. And if he isn't making notes about RuffLand or Happy Jack, he's paying attention right now because it's Don Currie's turn to come back to the Upland Nation podcast. Welcome back, Don.
Thank you, Scott. You know, I as I was listening to you during the break, I said, you know, we ought to sort of segue, if we're going to talk about gun fit, before we sort of leave chokes. And that is that, you know, we talked about going to the patterning board to verify barrel regulation.
Yeah.
There's really 3 times that we would go to the patterning board. And patterning boards, almost every sporting clays club or, you know, shotgun club has one. And you see them everything from a paper target like you would see in a tactical environment,
mm-hmm.
or the ideal patterning board is one that is a steel plate with a little hole in the middle, and you use either paint or, my preference is grease, industrial grease, to cover the surface of the steel plate, so that you can see what the pattern looks like when it hits the patterning board. And there's actually 3 reasons we would go to a patterning board. One is to check barrel regulation when you first get your shotgun. The second would be to check gun fit. And the third would be to, if you really wanted to get into how your chokes perform at different distances,
mm-hmm.
That's another reason to go to the patterning board. Now, I personally just think that's way too anal for me. You know, I'm and listen, there's a lot of people that will make a whole afternoon out of analyzing the choke constriction and the pattern density and all of that, where the holes are. That's not me. So, but those are the 3 reasons one would go to a patterning board, which sort of segues into the gun fit issue that I think you want to get to.
I do, and let me just add that we are officially deep in the weeds here, but that's okay too. George Trulock, of all people, he would know. Of course, he makes a study of this all day, every day. Pardon me. Pointed out so aptly and so simply to me, when you look at that pattern on the pattern board, if your pattern has bird-sized holes in it, then it's probably not a very good choke tube or load or something. There's something wrong there that you got to, dig a little deeper into. Enough said about choke tubes and that sort of thing. But, again, let's go back even farther. They're thinking about buying a gun. And one of the things they need to know is it going to work for me? And one of the things you're going to ask them is, well, have you ever had a gun fitted? So take us through that process for anything but, the big box first gun that we're buying for under $300.
Sure. I mean, the first question I always ask, and I am a dealer. I fit and create marriages between shooters and their next shotgun very often. And what I'll say is the first question I always ask when someone says, I want to buy a new shotgun. Okay, what are you going to use it for? So to me, that's the first and most important question. So is it going to be primarily dedicated to clay shooting sports? And if so, which discipline? Is it going to be skeet, trap, sporting clays? Or is it going to be an upland bird gun? Are you going to primarily use it for hunting over dogs? Or are you going to be going over to England and hunting driven pheasant? So it really, the intended use of the gun is really the starting point of trying to understand what's the right gun for you.
Yeah, let me just interject there because the first side-by-side I ever owned was actually built along English lines in that the stock was cut so that I could shoot incoming birds with the right kind of gun mount, for example. And it had two triggers, so I could, depending on how close that bird was and whether it was coming at me or not, I could choose the left barrel or the right barrel. The tubes, the chokes were effectively reversed from what most of us would use, in fact. So it does matter, and we do need to know those things. So okay, I want a gun that I want to use primarily for wild quail and pheasants, but I'll probably take it to the range, and my club has all three disciplines. So now what?
Yeah, so I would describe you as someone who's primarily oriented toward upland bird hunting. So you're hunting over dogs, you're not driven bird, correct?
Right? Yeah.
Okay, so you're primarily oriented toward upland bird hunting over dogs, but you're probably going to go to the sporting clays course to get in shape for the season, but your goal in going to a sporting clays course is really to improve your upland bird hunting. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I deal with shooters like that all the time. So a field gun is probably what you're looking for, right? Whether it's over and under or side by side is really a matter of preference. As I think we talked about in the last podcast, holding a side by side and moving a side by side to a bird, you're holding a piece of history, really, right? So it's really a matter of preference. It's tomatoes, right? Do you want a side by side or do you want an over and under? There is a little bit of a visibility advantage in an over and under if you have targets coming from underneath the gun. So, which typically they do in a upland bird scenario.
Yeah, and in fact, it's now you bring it up. Many of the birds I shoot at are not only coming from ground level, but ground level below me. Chucker hunting, right, for example. So that explains a lot. Okay, so here we are.
But hey, you want to be challenged out there too, right?
Listen, so that's seldom a problem.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of very proficient hunters that love hunting quail with a 410 just because it adds a little additional challenge.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we are. So I'm walking through the gun room, and you're thinking, okay, what do I have on the rack that might help this guy, or what can I get and put in his hands? But once that gun shows up, we still got work ahead of us, don't we?
Yeah, no, we do, and double trigger and single trigger are considerations. So. Going back to a question you asked me earlier, do I ever, change barrels? If I was in a hunting scenario where I definitely wanted the ability to quickly go back and forth between top barrel and bottom barrel, or left barrel and right barrel, more constriction, less constriction, I would definitely opt for a double trigger gun, because it is by far the quickest way. And still today, with technology that really hasn't advanced since the late 1800s, it's still the quickest way today to go from one barrel, to make a decision to go to choose one barrel versus another, is to use a double trigger gun.
Don, you just said something that is it's mind-boggling on the surface, and if we go deeper, it's even scarier. And that is, what other devices do we use that are still using 100-year-old technology?
Well, it's so fascinating, and I know a bit more than the average person about the history of shotgunning and how it all began, but I don't know nearly as much as some of the other folks that have written books out there about the history of shotgunning. But what is fascinating, it's just absolutely is that technology has really not gone much further past the late 1800s, early 1900s, when the British gentry, in the heyday of pigeon shooting and competitive shotgun shooting, really funded that R&D. So we have most of the the mechanisms that we have in shotguns today are really we can thank the British gentry of that era for funding the R&D for us.
Yeah, because back then it was some schmo with a block of metal and a file, and somebody had to pay him to make something out of that.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting that in the early days there really was no gun industry, if you will. There were no gun makers. They were actually blacksmiths. And so it became sort of a specialty area of metalworking to be a gun maker. But gun makers really didn't come into being. It was more of a specialty of metalwork than the gun makers the famous gun makers, particularly the early ones in Britain that we know well today, like Currie and Holland, et cetera. Yeah.
Are most of the guns that we buy these days, is their length of pull, which is the simplest aspect of gun fit, is their length of pull about right for about most of us, or do we really need to pay attention to that before we go much farther?
Yeah, so to the neophyte, when you talk about length of a gun, people always think it's the length of the barrel. So ballistically and how a gun performs, the length of the barrel means very little.
Yeah,
ballistically, it just doesn't matter. So what's important though is when you mount that gun as an individual, how does your eye come to rest? Where does your eye come to rest in relationship to the center of the rib, which obviously sits on the top barrel if it's an over and under, or between the two barrels if it's a side by side. So so we're looking for two things in the rudimentary subject of gun fit. We're really looking for two things. We're looking for comfort and we're looking for visibility. And again, being very rudimentary here, very basic in gun fitting, because there's, when I do gun fittings, I specify about 25 plus different specifications. But if we really want to keep it simple, the simple way to look at it is length of pull, which is the distance between the front face of the trigger and the back of the butt pad. That length of pull is usually measured in inches or millimeters, depending on what side of the planet you're on. And your pitch, which is the angle of the butt pad in relationship to the rib. So a shotgun with no pitch would be the butt pad would be completely perpendicular to the rib. One that has pitch would be the toe, which is the bottom of the stock, right? Would be inset a little bit. So in other words, the top, if you just held a shotgun and mounted a shotgun, the top, the part of the butt that's nearest the top of your shoulder would be slightly back from the toe, which is the part that hits your pectoral muscle there.
And that's what that British style gun I was using for a while wasn't it? It was built so that birds coming toward me up high, the gun was, would that be right, or would it be the other way around?
No, that's right. Yeah, and actually the gun you were describing earlier is actually, you rarely ever see whether it be a double trigger or single trigger gun where the first barrel is tighter than the second barrel.
Right.
The only time you really see that is in a grouse gun.
Yeah.
So grouse, driven grouse, unlike, grouse in the northern part of the United States where you're hunting over dogs and in thick woods. In England, driven grouse, the first shot you're going to get on a grouse is going to be at a longer distance than will the second barrel. So that would be an instance where you might find a gun that has a tighter constriction on the front trigger for a longer distance shot, and a more open choke barrel for the back trigger or second trigger.
So getting back to length of pull, because this is the one, we can all do this one, and we've all fallen for the gun seller's trick of putting the butt of the gun stock in your elbow and then putting your finger on the trigger, and if it's right on the trigger, then it fits you. But that works for every gun, almost every gun I've ever seen. you're saying to get to understand length of pull, you got to put that gun up safely, of course, to your shoulder, and you got to look down the barrel, over the rib. And what do you look for there?
Well, trying to fit a gun is sort of like trying to prescribe your own medication, right? So, but if one were trying to see if a gun fit them, they would want to pick a spot. And well, let me back up a second. So length of pull is really for comfort, and so is pitch. Those two elements are strictly comfort. We're not really talking yet about does the gun shoot where you're looking, because that's really the goal, right?
Yeah.
So we want comfort. We want the gun to be comfortable, because if it's too long, you're going to feel an excess amount of recoil.
Okay.
If it's too short, you're probably on recoil. The base knuckle of your thumb is probably going to be hitting you in the nose. So you're too close to the receiver or the action in that case. So you want to have your nose when you're fully mounted to the gun. When we look for a rudimentary fit for a shooter, we want the nose to be somewhere between 1 and 1.5 inches between the nose and the base knuckle of the thumb on the trigger hand.
I love it. I mean, everybody could figure that out.
Yeah. So, and then in terms of the angle of the butt pad or the pitch, you basically want even coverage between the heel, which is the top of the butt pad, and the toe, which is the bottom of the butt pad. Now, that's really hard to do a self-assessment.
Yeah.
But if you were going to do that without going to a gun fitter, the best thing you can do is have someone take a picture of you from the side when you're fully mounted to the gun. And then you can sort of see, do I have even coverage on my, on my shoulder and pectoral muscle from the heel down to the toe? When I'm fully mounted to the gun. If you've got even coverage, then you're probably in good shape.
And by even coverage, you mean, is it touching every bit of my shoulder, the cup of the shoulder there, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you don't have enough pitch, or enough angle where the toe isn't in far enough as compared to the heel, what you'll see is the top half of the butt pad actually separated from the shoulder.
Got it.
And the bottom half of the butt pad is the only part that's in contact.
Okay.
So that would be indicative of a gun that didn't have enough pitch for the particular shooter.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move along, because really what we want to talk about is how this all works in the field. So if you were taking somebody, one of your instruction students into the bird field, and you were lucky enough to go to that plantation in Georgia where you had pointing dogs, and you and your student were walking behind the dogs slam a point, it's time, it's go time, here we are. What are the things you want to tell that person before they actually pull the trigger?
Well, so every lesson that I do, regardless of the sort of the orientation of the student, whether they're a bird hunter or a clay shooter or whatever, the first thing I want to do is I want to do a little pointing test on them. So I want to see what their eye dominance is. And then I quickly move into gun fit. And by gun fit, I usually ask them to focus on a spot. Let's say it's a road sign or whatever the case may be in the parking lot. And I say, okay, I want you to mount to that spot as if you're shooting a going away quail or a going away trap target, and just mount naturally, like you're, start in a good ready position with the gun off the cheek, and then go ahead and mount the gun to that spot as if you're shooting a going away target. And when they do that, I'm looking for, I'm going to position myself in two different places. First, to the side, I'm checking the length of pull. So I'm checking to see if the nose is, an inch to an inch and a half from the base knuckle. Then I'm also checking the coverage of the butt pad. As soon as I check that, I say, okay, bring the gun down. I want you to do the same thing again. Now, obviously, I've made sure that the gun is safe, and because that could be a pretty big occupational hazard to get in front of. So we've already made sure the gun's safe. So I'm having them mount again to that target. Okay, and now I'm stepping in front of the gun, and I want to see where does that shooter's pupil end up in comparison to the center of the rib? So I'm looking for a couple of things. Is the eye at the right elevation, okay, as compared to the surface of the rib, right? So if the eye is too low, and I'm really looking for the colored part of the eye or the iris, right? Is the whole eyeball like a marble on a table? That's really what I'm looking for. I want to see that whole eyeball sitting on top of the rib and centered on the rib. That's the ideal situation. Now, so what I can see sometimes, what I will see sometimes, is the iris or the eyeball falling below the surface of the rib. So what that tells me is that shooter's not going to be seeing the targets real well. So what we need to do is somehow raise the level of the student's eye. How do we do that? We raise the comb, which is the flat surface on top of the back stock, right? So we need to add a little bit of height there. And there's some different ways we can do that in field expedient mode. And then the other thing we're looking for is the, let's say the iris is at the proper elevation, okay? So it's like a marble on a table. Is the iris left or right of the center line of the rib? And that is commonly referred to as cast. So backing up a second, so elevation is typically referred to as drop at comb. So it's how much does that comb drop below the level of the rib? If you extended that rib line all the way back to the heel, how much does that comb drop from that imaginary line? So that defines your elevation of the eye, and then the centering of the eyeball along the center of the rib is what we typically refer to as the cast of the stock. So the cast of the stock, or the bend of the stock, left or right, typically facilitates the eye being centered or ill-centered in comparison to the rib.
I keep hearing more and more these days that a lot of guns from Europe are coming without any cast on them anymore. Now, is that just a vicious rumor, or is that true?
Well, I don't know about that specific statement, but there are a lot of mass-produced guns that are produced with very little cast, and let's say an average amount of drop, and that's typically so that the person who could shoot that gun, there's more people who could shoot that gun because it has sort of an average, or it has no cast and sort of an average amount of drop. So the one that comes to mind is the Beretta Silver Pigeon 1, for example. Beretta, and that's a great starter over and under, by the way. I mean, it's a great value. You can probably, I think you can pick one up for about $2,700. You could spend another $2,000, and I don't think you're going to get a better made gun. And what's amazing about the Beretta Silver Pigeon is just how consistent their stock specifications are. Some other manufacturers out there, you'll pick up one gun and they may have more drop or more cast, or it may be barrel heavy versus back heavy. The Beretta Silver Pigeon series is so incredibly consistent from gun to gun. And so, getting back to your original question, what am I looking for? I'm looking for comfort in terms of length of pull and pitch as far as gun fit goes, and I'm looking for the iris to be centered and atop the rib, so that to promote visibility and to make sure that the gun is shooting where the shooter is looking. If the iris is centered and atop the rib, the gun's going to shoot where the shooter's looking.
Love it. That is, I've never heard it described so simply and easily that, we might even be able to do some of that in front of a mirror. Yeah.
No, I think as long as you're confident that you can mount the gun naturally, because a lot of, I will say in about 60-70% of the cases, when I check a client's fit in the parking lot, it changes when they get on targets. So they'll tend to either apply more pressure, downward pressure of the head to the comb, or you'll see the shooter actually apply less pressure, so a little lighter mount. So it's important to during a gun fit to not only evaluate the person in a static mode, which I do, but it's absolutely critical to evaluate them in a dynamic mode in the field or on moving targets, on clay targets. So I'll never put specifications on a specification sheet without validating the specifications for a shooter on moving targets. It's just the critical litmus test for gun fit.
All right, let's go hunting. So when you're out there in the field with somebody and they've been around a while and they think they're pretty good, and they probably are way better than me, but probably not as good as you. What are you're sitting back there, if you could tell them, and granted, sometimes it's not appropriate, but if you could hunt with somebody and at the end of the day they said, well, how did I do? What should I change? What is the thing that you would probably say to most people in a wing shooting situation?
So having been in the general manager of a quail hunting preserve for a couple of years, and working with a lot of quail hunters, hunting quail over dogs, I would say the number one reason for missed birds is almost always a mount that's too quick.
I'm laughing at me, not with me.
So and typically that tends to resolve itself slightly from the beginning of the hunt toward as the hunt advances a little bit. Because I think you relax a little bit and you're not quite as hyped up. But a quick mount, and I can add to that, a quick and inefficient mount to a bird will by far is, in my opinion, the number one reason for a missed bird.
Oh, I'm with you 100%, only because I live that hell every time I go hunting. What about foot position?
Mm-hmm.
We're walking up on a pointing dog. How do you settle in at that point? Because that's what most of us are going to do. We're going to kick the birds up ourselves, unless they fly wild. So we got a dilemma here. We got to walk in. We got to kick around, and then we got to set our feet to shoot the dang bird. Got any advice for us?
Well, I won't get into the dance one has to do to kick up birds, but let's just sort of keep it simple and say, okay, if we're hunting over dogs, and let's say we've got somebody working the dogs in the middle, and we have a shooter on the left and shooter on the right. So ideally, the first thing you want to do when you have dogs on point is you want to establish a shooting line, right?
Yeah.
So that means that the shooter on the left and the shooter on the right are going to come up on line, so that you could almost draw a straight line between the shooter on the left, the dog and or the guide or both, and the shooter on the right. So you want to establish that line. That's what
no shooters are behind innocent bystanders, if you will.
Exactly, and that's a safety issue. And if you do happen to have someone else walking along, that person walking along should be immediately behind the dogs or the guide, if there happens to be a guide.
Yep.
So that's a safety issue. And then before the hunt even begins, you ought to have that conversation with the folks in your hunt to establish zones of fire. Right. So typically the guy on the left of the dog should have a zone from 9 to 12, and the person on the right should have a zone from 12 to 3. Now, if whether, and a lot of plantations will for shooters that come up on a plantation that the guides never hunted with the shooters before, you really want to maintain that sort of level of safety, because having ran a plantation before, it's a pretty dangerous thing to be a guide in on a plantation where you're trying to manage the dogs, you're trying to keep everybody safe, and it's really important to have established those zones of fire. So having said that, the person on the left zone of fire is 9 to 12, then, and this just departs a little bit from what some of your viewers may have heard in the past, but that lead foot, right-handed shooter, that lead foot should be pointed somewhere around the 1030.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the shooter on the right, the right-handed shooter, that left foot, the lead foot, should be somewhere around the 130. So why do I say that? Because now your body is positioned such that you can make that move very easily anywhere between 9 and 12.
Sure.
If you orient yourself to that 12 o'clock and you get a bird that's going, sort of from the dog and hooking at a steep angle left, right, sharp angle left, you're going to sort of run out of swing room, if you will. And if we reverse that to a left-handed shooter, on the left side of the dog, that left-handed shooter should have their front foot pointed at about 11. It should be pointed around the 1030.
Yeah.
And if they're on the right side of the dog, that right foot should be pointed somewhere around the 130. And stance becomes a big issue as well. So how should the body be positioned once you've got your feet oriented correctly? Well, your knees ought to be just out of lock, so just flexed a little bit, butt back a little bit, hit nose over toes. So nose and shoulders forward, nose over toes. And if you do that and you mount the gun, or you're in your ready position, the heel of the gun is in front of your armpit, you can very smoothly and easily move the gun up to the cheek without much wobbling with the gun.
And you can take your time to do that so that it is a deliberate, careful, and well located mount when you're done, right?
Exactly. And what a rushed move does is it pulls your eye off the bird to the gun. And now you have to acquire the bird again now that you're mounted to the gun. So I always encourage shooters, just slow down and lead with the front hand. Keep your eye on the bird, make that connection with the bird from the time you acquire it visually all the way through the shot, leading with the front hand and keeping your eye on the bird.
So we're there. Our feet are in what we hope is the right position. What are we looking at?
On the bird, we're looking at typically when you have a bird flying away from you, you're going to see the head above the body.
But right? I mean, before that, we're waiting for somebody. We're waiting for the bird to get up. So are we looking at where we think the bird is, or off in the distance, or what?
Yeah, great question. So if we focus our eyes on where the dog's nose is, our eyes are probably going to get beat by the bird. Okay, and it's just going to be a blur, and our brain is going to register a panic move. So again, that's going to all feed that panic to the first bird, right? So what I recommend is that we leverage our peripheral vision to pick up the bird that initially flushes off of the floor, right?
Yeah.
So in order to do that, we want our eyes, somewhere oriented out to the 12 o'clock, but sort of out to distance, maybe 15 feet out in front of the dog. Yeah. That way, our peripheral vision can initially pick up the bird, and now we're not positioned for this panic move.
Yeah. Oh, that was worth the entire podcast. Don Currie is my guest. I'm Scott Linden. Don is the chief instructor for the National Sporting Clays Association. He knows his birds and he knows his dogs too, as you're figuring out, as am I. One last question in that world, and that is, I think I know the answer because I live it every time I'm in the field. All of that taken into consideration, do we shoot too soon anyway?
I don't say that we shoot too soon. I just go back to my original comment of, what's the biggest mistake made in the field over birds. And I think if you slow down your mount by half and lead with the front hand, what that's going to do is that's going to promote the visual connection with the target.
Yeah.
And what we really want to prevent is an interruption of that visual connection. So when we have a quick mount, or we're more focused on mounting the gun than we are on staying visually connected with the bird, that's typically when we miss. So just slowing down the gun, the mount by half, leading with the front hand, maintaining that visual connection with the bird all the way through the trigger pull. That's the key.
All right. Those of you who are looking at your phone right now, hit the little circle back thing. Listen to that 3 times in a row. Make note of it. Practice it at one of the ranges you go to. Don Currie, always fun to talk with you. I can wish you a happy new year one more time, and please send some of that humidity and warmer temperature my way. Thanks so much again for being a part of the Upland Nation podcast. Have a great 2022, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you, Scott. It's always great to be on.
Oh, boy, there are some gold nuggets in there, so go back and re-listen to this one more time when you get a moment. Share it with a friend or two, and, of course, appreciate a positive review as well. We got lots more to come, but before we get to the new Upland Nation Puzzler and your dog's New Year's resolutions, a couple things. First off, find more information about Don at DonCurrie, CURRIE.com, DonCurrie.com. And the podcast is brought to you in part by Dr. Tim's Natural Performance Dog Food. Check out some of the videos on my YouTube channel, show you in graphic detail why it's important to feed the right food at the right times, including the right balance and the right sources of proteins and fats. It's important to get protein from both animal and marine sources, and it's important to get different types of fat for different types of amino acids, among other things. Dr. Tim Hunt has all that information, and including where he sources his ingredients at DRTIMS. If you're looking for peak performance in your bird dog, you got to start with the fuel you're putting into the tank, and that's Dr. Tim's Natural Performance Dog Food. 30% off your first order. Just use the code Upland Nation. Free delivery. Yeah, I use it, and so should you. And speaking of shooting instruction, if you're trying to become a better shot and you can't get to Don, well, you might visit Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School. They're near Salem, Oregon, an incredible facility. From an RV park to every shotgun discipline you can think of, it's all right there. Plus a pro shop with lots of guns you can try and certified instructors. Try the guns you're thinking about buying, stay a few days, and enjoy every game you can think of. Multi-purpose clay target facility. Places to hunt nearby in Oregon and Washington along the way. Learn more at midvalleyclays.com. Talk to Dave Fiedler and find out what you need to know about shooting and buying a new gun. Yeah, at the end of the month, I'll be giving away a very rare, I'll call it a limited edition, signature series real bird bumper from my own line. Yeah, one of the last ones out there. Your dog will love it, so answer the Upland Nation Puzzler question correctly, and you're entered to win. Here it is. Message me on Facebook with your answers. What is the common name for a bird the biologists call the Phasianus colchicus? I'll say it one more time. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. What is the common name for the bird that biologists call Phasianus colchicus? Hey, look it up. Phasianus starts with a P, by the way. It's all right there. Just look it up and then enter to win. Send me a Facebook message. Okay, I promised your dogs that they could express their New Year's resolutions as well. And boy, do they have something to say about us. George Cummins says his dog Samson wants a couple more titles and to hunt in a new state. Hey, come on out, George. I'll show you a real Great Basin hunting out here. It should be a good time for you folks who love the flat ground in South Dakota. Lance Larson wants Zane to earn his AKC Master Hunter title this season. And Zane, you're also got to be on the lookout for scaled quail. First one for Lance, first one for you, matching up to that Mearns he got last season, thanks to you. Gordon Vavrick says his dog wants to hunt more now than ever. At least that's the look he gets constantly. Jack Leventree says his dog wants more birds. Well, who doesn't? Good boy. And Travis Hampton says Macy promises not to counter snurf and hopes to get a blue grouse and a pheasant next year. Good girl, Macy. And whoever your accomplice is there, I can't tell with just one paw in the picture. But Macy looks like an in-shape black Labrador. Thank you, Travis, for keeping your dog away from fat and towards skinny. Good job, everybody. You know, this part of the show is brought to you by FindBirdHuntingSpots.com. Don talked to or alluded to a whole bunch of topics that we've got covered there, so check them out. There's new material every week. Appreciate all your comments on that last piece I did on some pretty good dogs I've known over the years. You notice my dog wasn't in there? Anyway, thank you all for visiting FindBirdHuntingSpots.com. And that'll do it for us here at the Upland Nation Podcast. If you appreciate what you're hearing, tell your friends. Stay in touch at the Wing Shooting USA and Upland Nation Facebook pages. And if you are so inclined to leave a good review, I'd appreciate that wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you very much in advance for that. I am looking forward to getting out a little bit more myself. I hope you are too. Don't let the yucky weather put you off too much. I'll leave you with this anonymous observation that most of us can probably agree with 110%. Life without a dog is like an unsharpened pencil. It has no point. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you in the field.